Sudan isn't collapsing on its own. It's being taken apart. And behind every headline about civil war is a story of U.S. empire, greed, and betrayal. While headlines point to the UAE as the culprit behind Sudan's humanitarian disaster, the truth runs far deeper and more sinister. For over 2 decades, it's been Washington's official policy to turn Sudan into the failed state we see today. As part of a new Cold War against China, Russia, and Iran, and a campaign to destroy any nation that dares to stand with Palestinian liberation. What's happening in Sudan isn't another African tragedy. It's an architectural design of U.S. imperialism, where starvation, displacement, and genocide are the tools of Washington's official policy. In Sudan today, entire cities have been leveled, hospitals bombed, women raped and executed on camera. Families are starving while Sudan's gold is being stripped and flown to Dubai. Sudan once stood at the heart of the axis of resistance, a bridge between Iran and Palestine and Lebanon, a logistical lifeline for weapons to Gaza and South Lebanon, and a strategic ally in the Red Sea. That defiance sealed its fate. Like Libya and Iraq before it, Sudan has been targeted for destruction, punished for its independence and its solidarity with Palestine. And at the center of this assault are 2 of Washington's most reliable proxies, Israel and the United Arab Emirates. They've been deployed by Washington to do what the empire can no longer do openly, to wage wars by proxy, seize resources, and crush the resistance from within. Israel provides intelligence and strategy, while the UAE provides the money, the weapons, and the cover. Together, they carry out the dirty work of U.S. imperialism. Now, Sudan sits on a fault line connecting the Red Sea, the Sahel, and the Horn of Africa, regions central to China's Belt and Road Initiative and Russia's trade networks. Now, its ports could link Africa's mineral wealth to a new multipolar economy no longer dependent on the US dollar. For Washington, that is an existential threat. China's Belt and Road offers nations like Sudan an escape from the IMF, the World Bank, and the petrodollar system that have trapped the global South in debt for decades. If Sudan joined that network, it could connect Africa's gold, oil, and mineral wealth directly to Beijing, bypassing Western control entirely. And that's what Washington fears most. By collapsing Sudan, it weakens both the axis of resistance and the Belt and Road Initiative backed by BRICS, blocking Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran from gaining a foothold in Africa. It's the same Cold War logic that destroyed countries like Libya, Syria, and Yemen. If a nation rejects Western capital and seeks independence, it must be destabilized, divided, and starved into submission. And Israel and the UAE, deployed by Washington, have become the empire's regional enforcers, controlling the Red Sea, isolating Iran, and looting Sudan's gold and oil under the banner of stability and democracy. Now, the destruction of Sudan didn't begin yesterday. It began decades ago with a long campaign to make Sudan ungovernable. In 2019, after years of sanctions, isolation, and CIA interference, Washington and its Gulf allies orchestrated the fall of Omar al-Bashir under the illusion of democratic reform. In his final years, Bashir actually tried to win the West's approval, the same fatal mistake Muammar Gaddafi made. Now, if you remember, Muammar Gaddafi famously shook the hands with Tony Blair and agreed to disarm for an exchange for political survival. But the empire couldn't allow for Libya to become an independent state, where Gaddafi wanted to create an African gold currency to unite the continent and ditch the US dollar. So NATO invaded, and Gaddafi was disposed of within a blink of an eye, dragged through the streets of Tripoli after being sodomized with a machete.
That is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
For Omar al-Bashir, well, he tried to negotiate with the US and he ended up turning to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, agreeing to cut ties with Iran in exchange for political survival. Well, he did everything they asked for, and they toppled him anyway, because the empire doesn't forgive and it does not forget. They wanted a compliant Sudan, not a sovereign one, and they wanted to ensure it would never again stand with Iran, with Palestine, with Yemen, or Lebanon again. So to justify that outcome, the empire had to make Sudan look like a monster. In the early 2000s, Washington labeled it a state sponsor of terrorism, not for violence, but for its alliances. Then came Darfur, the perfect emotional weapon. This was the humanitarian theater that paved the way for NATO's destruction of Libya, but it was first rehearsed inside of Sudan. Western think tanks, NGOs, and intelligence agencies turned a regional conflict into a global spectacle. Do you remember when celebrities like George Clooney and Angelina Jolie became the moral front of an imperial campaign, speaking of genocide and saving Sudan, while US and Israeli intelligence quietly mapped out all of the oil and gold fields and reserves? As George Clooney called for intervention, the CIA was arming the proxies. As Angelina Jolie pleaded for human rights, Western and Israeli-linked allies backed warlords. And even Jolie has since hinted that celebrity activism can be manipulated to serve Western agendas, turning compassion into consent for war. By the time al-Bashir fell, the world had accepted the lie that Sudan was a failed state. Its people primed for foreign salvation, its resources already marked for extraction. With al-Bashir gone, the UAE rose as Washington and Tel Aviv's new enforcer. The UAE was once known for its skyscrapers and malls, but Abu Dhabi became a hub for proxy wars, financing coups, arming militias, and laundering blood gold under the banner of counter-terrorism. Through the Abraham Accords, Israel and the UAE fused Emirati money, Israeli intelligence, and Western arms into one war machine. And Sudan became their next laboratory. As Sudan's people starve and face a genocide, its resources are stripped bare. The vultures are feeding. And one of those companies is called Al Junaid Multi-Activities, owned by RSF commander Hamati's family, seized Sudan's gold mines, turning blood-soaked earth into its private fortune. Another Amiral Alliance for Mining, backed by the UAE, took over the Kush mine and funneled gold through Dubai, erasing its origins before it hit global markets. Western oil giant Schlumberger returned under the guise of reconstruction, even as famine spread and cities turned to ash. Sudan's economy was carved up between the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces, who profited off of war and smuggling while civilians starved. The famine we see today isn't a byproduct, it is the weapon. The rapid support forces didn't just appear out of nowhere, they were created. In 2015, during the US-backed war on Yemen, the UAE recruited thousands of Sudanese fighters, many ex-Janjaweed, as mercenaries against Yemen's Ansar Allah movement. They fought with Emirati funding and Western weapons under Washington's quiet approval. That war gave the RSF training, funding, and global connections, turning them into a regional army for hire. They fought Yemen's resistance yesterday, and today they're massacring civilians in Khartoum, Darfur, and beyond. These are not tribal clashes. This is a genocide engineered and financed by the same powers that once claimed to bring democracy into Sudan. And since 2023, Israel and the UAE have armed and financed the RSF, ensuring their grip on Sudan's gold and ports. Gold is flowing from Darfur to Dubai, refined and sold worldwide. Once melted, its origins vanish, but not its blood. That wealth cycles through Western banks, defense contractors, and tech supply chains in Tel Aviv, London, and New York. For Israel, Sudan's collapse is strategic. It weakens Iran's allies, opens African markets, and secures Red Sea routes around Yemen's blockade. And while Yemen sacrifices to blockade Israeli ships for Gaza, the UAE and its allies quietly keep Israel's trade alive. It's the same imperial pattern: destabilize, demonize, and then divide. Every time the target is a nation that stands with Palestine, aligns with China or Iran, and refuses to bow. But make no mistake, this isn't just a war on the resistance. It's a war on the future of our world itself. Sudan's collapse sends a message, a clear message to every African and Asian nation daring to work with Beijing or Moscow or Iran. Break the dollar and we'll break your country. Sudan's suffering isn't collateral damage, it's the cost of resistance. As famine spreads and children die, gold still moves, oil still flows, and the US empire still profits. They call it stability and democracy, but what they've built is a system of slavery wrapped in the language of democracy. Every nation that resists, whether it's Palestine, Yemen, Iran, Lebanon, and now Sudan, faces the same fate: sanctions, proxy wars, starvation, and propaganda. This is the architecture of US imperialism, the export of so-called Western democracy against the global South. Sudan is not another African tragedy. It is the front line in humanity's struggle for freedom, between the axis of assistance and the axis of resistance, between a dying Western order and a world fighting to break free. And that's why Sudan matters. It's where the war for a free Palestine, the war on Africa, and the war against China's multipolar ambitions all converge. This is the face of modern-day colonialism. I'm Manar Adli, and this is Behind the Headlines for MintPress News.